Imagine him beneath the flicker of gas lamps, wrestling with the same fear that visits us when the floorboards of certainty creak. What if everything I grew up believing, about God, about love, about myself, could collapse in a single tremor of doubt? Kierkegaard called that tremor the dizziness of freedom, a vertigo produced when every familiar support suddenly vanishes, and we discover that believing is not a comfortable armchair but a cliff edge. Out there, he wagered, lies the only place faith can truly begin. Born in 1813 to a deeply pious father who had once cursed God on a windswept Jutland heath, Kierkegaard grew up absorbing two incompatible melodies: the severe hymn of Lutheran guilt and the playful rhythms of the city's new liberal optimism. 5 of his 6 siblings died young, his own body was frail, and yet money from his father's hosiery fortune freed him to prowl bookstores, attend the theater, eavesdrop in cafes, and stare for hours at rough drafts of his soul. He completed his theology degree, fell in love with the brilliant Regine Olsen, and then, in an eruption of self-doubt, broke off the engagement, sealing himself into a lifelong dialogue with absence. From that crack in his heart poured a literature both lyrical and explosive, either Slash or Fear and Trembling, the concept of anxiety, concluding unscientific postscript, works written under a masquerade of pseudonyms so that conflicting voices could debate what it means to exist. And the verdict again and again was sobering. Where reason ends, faith must risk everything. He wrote, "Without risk there is no faith." And again, faith is precisely the contradiction between the infinite passion of the individual's inwardness and the objective uncertainty. If you can prove God the way you prove a geometry theorem, he warned, you cancel the very possibility of believing. The life of faith is not a conclusion we reach. It is a question we choose to live inside, holding fast over 70,000 fathoms of water. To stage this drama, Kierkegaard summoned Abraham climbing Mount Moriah. In Fear and Trembling, he reimagines the patriarch hour after hour, silently convincing Isaac that the journey is an ordinary pilgrimage, only to tighten his grip on the knife when God commands the unthinkable. The point is not theological obedience, but psychological upheaval. Abraham exemplifies a knight of faith who can balance two contrary certainties. I will lose my son, and I will keep my son, and still act. Reason shatters. Doubt floods in. But in that breach, faith, raw, shivering, existential, erupts. Kierkegaard's genius was to see doubt not as an enemy, but as the midwife of authentic conviction. Doubt is conquered by faith, just as it is faith which has brought doubt into the world, he wrote in his journals. Only a passion strong enough to face uncertainty, without anesthesia, deserves to be called belief. We scroll until dawn, inhaling outrage, longing for evidence. Yet the deeper hunger remains unchanged, to find a truth vast enough to encompass our questions without erasing them. If that resonates with you, take a moment, right now, to subscribe and enable notifications so you won't miss the next chapter of this unfolding conversation. One tap keeps these philosophical voyages alive. Back to 1846. Kierkegaard is publishing concluding unscientific postscript, declaring that the highest truth is not an object but subjectivity. The lived intensity of a single person staking everything on an inward commitment. Academic proofs, he insists, cannot deliver what the heart demands. A self can be formed only by choosing. Yet choice births anxiety, that familiar flutter in the gut when every option is still possible and none guaranteed. He calls it angst, the moment before leaping, when possibility is both exhilarating and horrifying. He diagrams 3 developmental stages. First comes the aesthetic life, chasing pleasure until boredom dissolves meaning. Then the ethical life, embracing duties, social roles, respectable certainty. But beyond both beckons the religious stage, where one must abandon calculation and plunge into paradox. This leap is not a rational whimsy. It is the most deliberate act imaginable, precisely because nothing external can justify it. As climber and cliff become one instant, faith happens, or it doesn't. No crowd can push you. No argument can catch you. Kierkegaard confronts us. Do you dare hold convictions that reason alone cannot secure? Can you live in the tension between longing for proof and recognizing that proof would sterilize the very adventure of existence? He warns against those who long to turn wine back into water, to reduce mystery to manageable formulas. Better, he says, to tremble honestly than to parrot doctrines you no longer feel. Biographers note that this courage cost him. Copenhagen's satirical newspaper, The Corsair, mocked him mercilessly, his stooped gait, his eccentric dress. Crowds jeered in the streets. He responded not with retaliation, but with a deeper critique of Christendom's complacency. The greatest hazard of all, he wrote, losing one's self, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. Doubt, then, becomes a wake-up call, an alarm that the self is at risk of being lulled to sleep. Listen to the pulse behind his prose, the conviction that truth must be lived. It is not enough to recite the creed. You must embody it at breakfast, in traffic, when the biopsy results arrive. Every day, he says, faith must be constantly intent upon holding fast the objective uncertainty. Not solved, held, like Jacob wrestling the angel until dawn, limping but blessed. He refused, therefore, to found a school. There would be no Kierkegaardians. Only individuals are facing their leaps. And across the 20th century they surfaced, Martin Heidegger rediscovering being through anxiety, Jean-Paul Sartre insisting on radical freedom, Paul Tillich naming faith the courage to accept acceptance. The thread is Kierkegaard's whisper, make the decision and become yourself. You can almost see him, final months, collapsing from spinal disease, dictating blistering attacks on the Danish state church for domesticating the gospel into comfort. He dies at 42, buried in Assissin's cemetery, Regine in silent attendance. She keeps his letters all her life, and yet the little Dane will not stay buried. Every time a student feels the jolt of realizing that the syllabus cannot tell her what to live for, every time a parent pacing the ICU discovers that surrender and hope are the same motion, Kierkegaard stands again, pointing toward the night sky where stars gleam like burning questions. So where does this leave you? Perhaps you harbor doubts you've tried to stamp out, about your career, your politics, your childhood faith. Kierkegaard invites you to listen to them, not to surrender to cynicism, but to treat doubt as a forge, heating the raw metal of assumption until it glows and can be hammered into something sturdy enough for real storms. Because true faith, he says, is not a barricade against uncertainty. It is a ship maintained on open water, enthusiastically pumping to keep her afloat, even as the waves crash. Only in motion can she sail. Only in motion can she carry you home. If this voyage stirred your questions, share them below and ring the notification bell. Together we'll keep navigating the fathomless sea, where doubt becomes the very tide that moves faith forward. Until next time, keep walking the fog-lit streets, and remember, the leap is yours to make, and yours alone.